The objective of this video is to walk you through the process of collecting appropriate data for your workforce, and then how to create a table to showcase that data for your supervisors or other stakeholders. Because we live in a data-driven world, your future positions, whatever they may be, will most likely require you to present collected data and analysis. You will be presented with a very similar question as from your supervisor. This particular video will focus on how to effectively collect and input data into a spreadsheet to present to your supervisor. Another video will help you create graphs as ways to analyze and present your data in a different form. We are also going to pretend that we work at a community health center. At this center, you provide patients with a health survey. The purpose of this survey is to understand the relationship between a person's education, income, and health status. We have created this anonymous survey that asks questions about the patient's basic demographics, both personal and household. When creating a survey, you need to make sure that the information in your survey fits the criteria of your question. So, we have asked for the patient's personal demographics, education, income, and health status. It is typically easiest to get patients to fill out paper copies of these forms. However, you now have to manually input the data. So now let's look at a checklist of tasks to complete. You need to collect the data, input the data into a spreadsheet, then make the spreadsheet clean and easy to read and follow. With the survey, you have already finished the first step of collecting the data. Now we need to input the data into a spreadsheet by opening up Microsoft Excel or any form of a spreadsheet. You will then begin by choosing the appropriate headers for the columns. Looking at this survey, I will need to list the specific demographics of each patient. The survey, however, was written in sentences. So for my table, I would need to make sure that the labels are short and simple, using the underlined keywords. So, now that you've evaluated the keywords and phrases, you're going to add the labels to your spreadsheet in Excel. I'm going to leave one row open for a title that I will add later. You're going to go ahead and put in your different data points. So I have added my column labels, but I realized that I forgot to put in a column for education. What I will do is I'm going to click on where I would like for it to go. I'm going to click on Insert, and then Insert Sheet Columns. It'll give me a column next to where I wanted it, and there I can add education. Now that I've completed my edits, I'm going to start adding in the data that I've collected via my surveys. I'm going to make sure that each row corresponds to one patient. You're going to notice that some of the data points are straightforward, like age, sex, ethnicity. However, some things are going to have a range of answers. For example, family income. I have chosen to use family income on a scale according to the poverty threshold. Also, any other information that doesn't really go with your data points but you want to include in your table, be sure to use brevity, those keywords or phrases that we were speaking of earlier. Now we've put in all of our data. Since you have successfully input your data into the spreadsheet, now it's time to make the spreadsheet clean and easy to read. As you know, our last step is to make sure that this graph looks clean and organized to present to your supervisor or stakeholders. I also want to make sure that my column labels are clean and visible to the stakeholder. I'm going to select all of that row, and I'm going to add some shading. So I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm going to click on something that's pretty neutral. Now it's just easier to see. I also want to select everything, go up to the top again, and select on all borders. It just makes the data points nice and clean and organized. Lastly, I want to make sure that you can see all of the information that is written. If you go to the top of your screen, you will be able to have this tool. You can slide it over and make sure that you are able to see all of your text. You have completed the last and final step for creating a table to present to your supervisor or stakeholders to help them analyze the data that you have collected. Thank you for watching this video tutorial, and I hope that it helped you.
Thanks, Erica. Hey y'all, I'm Marvin. I'm about to help you continue where Erica left off. So let's jump in and have a good time. Where we left off, Erica helped us prepare our data. Now we're going to go ahead and aggregate our data so that we can summarize it and then analyze it. To aggregate our data, to summarize and analyze it, we have to select our data, then we have to insert a pivot table, then we have to choose our rows and columns, and we'll go over a little mini lesson on that. Then we have to select our values, then adjust our calculations, summarize our information, visualize that data, and then finally analyze it. It'll give us the ability to make charts like these that we can then analyze so that we can derive effective insights. All right, let's jump in. First, you have to select your data. I click where my data begins, and I click and drag to select all of it. Great, now we have selected our data. Next step is to insert our pivot table. Once you have your data selected, you then go to the top and select Insert and select Pivot Table. Then you will come up with this screen. You'll click on Existing Workbook, and you'll have to select a particular cell in there. Click it. It pops up. You click OK. Now your pivot table is there on the left, and then to the right, you'll also see the pivot table editor. We have now inserted our pivot table. Now it's time to select our column. But first, we have to determine what are dimensions, because dimensions are our rows and our columns. Now suppose I asked you the question, what type of marble do people buy most, and you have this raw data. Altogether, 100% of people bought a marble. But how much of that percentage is distributed by color? That's our first dimension, our rows. Now let's add our second dimension, size. We see the percentage of people that have bought a marble by two dimensions, color and size. Now I can see that the marble most bought was the small blue marble with 31.58% of people buying it. Now I can select my rows and columns. My rows will be dimension 1, income strand. Then the next thing I want to do is select my column dimension, my second dimension. I go over and I select sex for gender, male and female, and put that under columns. Now we see we have our male and female columns. Now let's go on and select our values. Good work so far, guys. Now, when we look at our income bracket for rows, we see that 100,000 and over is in the wrong spot. So we're going to go ahead and grab it and move it down to place it in the right spot. Now let's go ahead and select our actual values. We're going to look at our diabetes value. It has a particular structure, and its structure is ones and zeros, as we see here. This is going to determine what calculation I use in my pivot table once I select my diabetes, and I move it into my values section. Once I have done that, a quick inspection of our pivot table shows us the following. The pivot table has summed our ones and zeros, but we don't want that. We want the averages of ones and zeros because that's a percentage. Look back at our pivot table editor and we see it says sum of diabetes. So we click on the little triangle and we select value field settings. Then this box comes up and we click on average and we press OK. Now we see that we have averages. However, they're in decimals. So we go up to Design, click on General, and we select Percentage. And now we have our percents. That's our calculation that we chose. And the way to summarize our data, using income as one dimension and gender as a second dimension. So at this point, we have selected our values, adjusted our calculations, and summarized our data. Now we will finish with the last two steps of visualizing our data and analyzing our data. Now with our data that's summarized, we go over to the Insert tab. Then we go over and click on Pivot Chart, and we select the bar graph and press OK. We have quickly visualized our data. Now let's analyze. First we see the middle income folk have diabetes. Then we see higher income folk only men do. Then those with lower income have no diabetes. So it seems like there is a relationship between diabetes and income. But at the higher end though, only for men. That is the conclusion of our tutorial for today. As you see, we've gone through the 8 steps and we've aggregated our data, summarized it, and analyzed it. Good work!